Hello. A warm welcome to all of you. We will have a presentation on an international outlook on the circular construction economy. Menno Rubbens is here, invited from Holland, the Netherlands, from cepezedprojects. You are you work with design-driven development projects, and you're an architect, but also trained as an economist.
Did not finish that study, but started it and did not finish it. So,
And you will give us an outlook on your work with CPZ, how it's structured, how it's organized, how you work, and some examples from what you've done lately.
And afterwards we can have some questions from the audience, or maybe you have some questions.
Welcome.
Okay. Thank you for this introduction. As I said, my name is Menno Rubbens. I'm an architect, currently working as a project developer within the company of CPZ. CPZ is a company that exists 50 years now. We founded 50 years ago. And from the discipline of the architect, the designing engineer, we started to get involved in the initiative of the building projects, but also in the building of the actual buildings. So now we have 4 departments within CPZ. One is the project development, which I'm owner and director of. CPZ, the architectural firm, which also has an interior architecture department, and CPZ Bouwteam, with which we actually build the buildings. And you see also by the dotted line that we start getting buildings that we realize that we built, getting them back to have new initiatives with it. And that are some of the projects that I'll show you later. We'll get back to that. 2 years ago, we were, I said it by the government, we were called Circular Hero for that year, because we are very intrinsically motivated to build circular buildings and to make the whole building industry more circular. I'm also a member of the transition team Circular Building Economy in the Netherlands. That's a team which advises the government how the building industry can become circular in 2050. And that's something that it takes a lot of effort, but we have a direct contact with the government, so we can have some influence on legislation, at least local legislation. The urgency of why we have to focus on sustainability and especially circularity is displayed in this graph. This is for the Netherlands. I did not have the figures for Sweden available, but if you see in the Netherlands, about 11% of all the CO2 emissions are caused by materials used in the building industry. So if you want to meet the 1.5 degrees goals of Paris, we really have to focus as a building industry on how can we reduce the CO2 emissions really drastically in the next decades. And one of the things that we can do to achieve that goal is to build more circular buildings, to get the circular economy within the building industry up and running. I'm not going to talk about architecture itself. I'm going to more talk about how the process is organized for us to make circular buildings. I can talk a lot about the beautiful architecture of CPZ, how we make buildings with a lot of daylight, which are pleasant to stay in. But I'll more focus on the process of getting sustainable and circular buildings. So they're applicable to all different kind of architectural aesthetics. The definition of sustainability. This is the definition by the Brundtland Commission from '87, which is a very logical, it's an open door. We have to meet the need of the present generations without compromising future generations. So this is what we should keep in mind whenever either if you make a vacuum cleaner or an airplane or a car or a building, always use this as a starting point for what you're actually going to make. Do you make future generations happy with your product, or will it be a burden for future generations? So that's a very abstract way of thinking about how your business can be organized. More into the building industry, we learned a lot from this guy, Stuart Brand. He's an American author who wrote this book about how buildings learn, how buildings get older, and how they get mature over time. And in this book, he has 3 statements which we find very attractive and we use in almost all of our projects. The first one is that he states that all buildings are a prediction. That means that you are always working in the future. If you have the client comes at your office, then he probably has a program of requirements which was written 1 or 2 years ago, and you're making a design which will be built in 2, 3, 4 years ago in the future. So you're always working with something that is a prediction as an architect or as a project developer. And that's not a problem, but you should realize that. So you should realize that as a human being, we're not very good at predicting the future. I often show this graph, which you see on the left, where year on year the installed photovoltaic cells are predicted, and you see year after year after year it's the wrong prediction. So we should stop predicting and start making buildings that are able to adapt to the future, to future developments, which we don't know what will happen. And one thing that is also standing in the way of that circular or sustainable development of the building industry is that a lot of buildings that we make suffer, as Stuart Brand calls it, suffer from premature complexity. That means that they are in the initial phase already so complex that during their lifetime it's very difficult to adapt to different circumstances, different processes that will evolve in society. So just like any other organism, a building should start relatively simple and being able to get more complex and more mature over time. And that's something that architects nowadays are not too aware of when they design their projects. The third one Stuart Brand mentioned is the approach when you have a design, when you design your building, you should approach it in different layers of time spans. So certain parts of your building can go on for hundreds of years, and other parts will have to be changed every 5 years, every 10 years, every 20 years. And all those different layers of your building, you should design them according to their lifespan and make sure that they don't interact too much, so that you have to tear down parts of the main construction to change your heating installation, for example. So really keep those different time layers apart. And then we have the circularity ladder, which shows the priority where you should focus on if you are really interested in making circular buildings. On the left, you see the entire ladder. It starts with a refuse, like that's built nothing, as you see on the right side. And you can also build with less material, or reuse materials, or remanufacture materials, repair materials. And you see at the end, almost on the bottom, there is recycling. And that's also something that's in the sustainability, also circularity discussion within the building industry. There's a lot of talk about recycling, and that's obviously good. If you have waste, you should recycle it, not burn it. But you should, before that, avoid making waste. So after you decided, do we have to build, or maybe you build nothing, can we build less with less material? Can we build smarter? Can we build more efficient? And can we build to minimize the waste? So to also minimize the recycling potential. But what we build are this kind of systems, which are very efficient but are not very flexible over time. And we see a lot of these buildings that become obsolete in 20, 30, 40 years. And that's way too short for the structure that should last for hundreds of years. But most of the time, because they're not flexible, they become obsolete in a few decades. So you might say that they're also some coming forth from our throwaway culture that we make and waste our products. So we should get away from buildings that are just once usable in one life cycle. When it comes to recycling, there's a lot of very nice projects which make use of old materials, but you should also not confuse this with circularity. This is not a circular. These are not circular buildings. These are buildings with recycled second-hand materials, and that's different from. I'll come to that later. Why that's different from circularity. A very hot topic is also business models in the circular economy. This is also an excess of a business model in China, where we have the bicycles, which there's very, very little bit of it is broken. It's too expensive to repair them. So in China you have vast graveyards of bicycles, which are getting thrown away. So also within your circular business model, you should always think ahead. What is it really that I'm making circular in this business model? And only the business model is never circular. The product should be circular as well. And this is an example where the product is not circular, only the business model. So in the end, you don't achieve very much. And then you see that what I just said, that really recycling gets most of the attention when it comes to circularity or sustainability. And we really should focus on more and more making buildings that don't generate any waste. Not while they're built, not generate waste while they're used, and especially don't generate waste when they're not usable anymore and when they have to be changed. So this principle, I'll show you a few projects, two of our projects, where we use this principle. The principle gets a lot of attention in the Netherlands. Recently, we had a visit from our Queen Maxima to one of our building sites, and she's really into circular economy. And we see that she functions as an ambassador to circularity, and that's very important for us to have all layers in the government, from the municipality to the central government to even the monarchs, getting involved and seeing the interesting parts of the circularity in our projects. The first project I'll show you is the theater, which was based in The Hague, in Scheveningen, at the sea. It was a temporary theater, and it had to be demolished. So the municipality put out a tender and asked if there's any party who can demolish this building in as circular as possible. At that time, we were working on a plan for a theater in the south of the Netherlands, and so we really could enter the tender with a new idea of taking down the building and putting it up on a different location in the Netherlands. So we actually could take down the building, put it on the truck, and move it to Os, in the south of the Netherlands. It sounds very simple. Obviously, it's not that simple. We first had to analyze the entire building. We had a breakdown of all the materials in the building to the different layers of the circularity index. So which parts can be reused, which parts should be remanufactured, which parts are not should be recycled, and we had an entire plan of the building in 3 dimensions. It's an entire BIM model to really be able to pinpoint every material, where it's now, and how it will be used in the new location. Okay, then we put up a team, people tearing the building down, demounting it, so really taking it apart with relatively, less noise, less pollution, less dust. So really demounting, disassembling it. The small parts like this, the main stage, consists of all kind of small materials, which are probably not so good reusable. But the bigger elements, the bigger prefabricated concrete elements of the central tower are very good demountable and reusable. We had the problem that the building was made as a temporary building, but it was not so well designed to be demounted. So we encountered a lot of details like this one, where we still had to get destructive techniques to get the steel loose from the concrete. But then, when it's loose, then you can demount it, put it on a truck, have an entire system of which elements go where, which elements go on the same truck and go in the storage space, so that if you want to rebuild the building, the materials that you need the first are not on the bottom, but are on the top. Sounds all very logical, but it's more a logistical problem and exercise than it is a technical one. So every lorry, every element was coded with a QR code where it says what's the measurements, where it comes from, where it will go to, on which truck lorry, on which truckload it was transported, and where it will be on the next in the storage space. I have a short movie. It's in Dutch. The titles. We started in January 23 last year. We demounted it's really a reverse building process. We started with the bigger elements, we started with the small elements in the interior, and ended up with the big elements, the concrete and the steel structure. In September last year, the last elements were moved to the new location, and now this is all that's left over. We could not use the ground flooring, the concrete slabs. That was a fiscal item. I won't get into that too much. And this is how it's now stored in Os, a storage area, which every material is labeled. We know exactly which element is. We're building a tent to have the steel covered for the weather circumstances. And on the new location, we will build this theater with it, partly from the theater in The Hague, partly from the existing theater that was there on the spot, and partly new elements. And the new elements we will use are mostly bio-based materials. So this will be the first theater which will be CO2 negative when it's actually built, and then built about for 70 or 80% of second-hand materials. A section of the building. The second project I would like to show you briefly is the project for the temporary courthouse. As we saw at the theater, that was not designed to be disassembled. We were not the original designer of the theater in The Hague. For this project, we were both the developer, the designer, the builder, and also responsible for taking it down and moving it to a different place. A temporary courthouse is a very high-end building. It has a lot of security measurements. It had the courtrooms, obviously, but also prison cells. So you could not build it. You should build it really as a permanent building, and that's what we did. We did not build a temporary courthouse. We built a permanent building, or we did not build a temporary building. We built a permanent building which is temporarily a courthouse, and in its second life and its third life it will be able to become have a different function. And how this process starts? Well, normally if you build a temporary building, you start with raw materials, with new materials, you build it, and after the first lifespan you end up with a lot of waste. Well, obviously this is not a very good way of working. Better is it to use second-hand materials and make them into your new building, use them for as long as the building is there, but then after that life you probably will also end up with a lot of waste. So the best scenario is this one, where you use second-hand materials, use them as good as possible, but design them to be reused after that first use, so that you get a cycle, really a circular cycle started. The problem with this scenario is that the first part, where the availability of second-hand materials in good quality, on time, with the right measurements, that's virtually, that's non-existent. The whole total marketplace is too small to plan on buildings like this on second-hand materials. So what we did is we applied this scenario where we used almost entirely new materials, but we designed them in a way that they can be taken apart very easily, so that they can be reused and reused and reused again. And if you start it like this, then you start up the third scenario. You make new high-end, high-quality materials with good descriptions. You make them available to make new buildings again and again and again. And we did that by designing the building according to those shearing layers by Stuart Brandt. So we have the main structure you see on the right here, which is the concrete and the steel structure. We have the facade in the middle. So the concrete and steel structure it will be permanently in this configuration also on the new location. The facade is designed in a modular way, so you can change the parts of the facade on the new location to different parts of the facade. So you can interact and alter the building to the local local circumstances of the new location, which we did not know in advance. And on the top left, you see the stuff, all the things that are particularly for the courthouse. And a lot of those elements will not be reused in the new building, but will probably be reused in all kind of different projects. And designing in this way, we had to have a lot of attention to not so much the materials itself, but for the connections of the materials. So we used steel and concrete a lot, which are very CO2 intense materials. But once you made them, you should design them detail them, the attachment, the joints, detail them in a way that they can be disassembled pretty easily. And we call that circular ready construction. So we don't call it a circular construction because we know it will be circular at the moment that the building is actually being reused. So we can only make our building ready for that circular economy without really predicting how they will be reused. This is the joint of the concrete hollow core slabs to the steel construction. Normally there's concrete poured over the concrete slabs, and then the steel and the concrete become one, and you cannot separate them anymore. So we designed this detail. We went with this detail to all kind of hollow core slab producers, but most of them were not interested in working with us because that's not part of their business model. They want to make new hollow core slabs, and they're not waiting. They don't have the infrastructure to get them back and to resell them again. So we had to do that ourselves. That was, but now, after we did it, most of the companies approached us to develop similar details. So that was nice to see that, actually production partners are starting up and really getting interested in making their products more circular. On this slide, you see on the right the building in use, and on the left the building during demounting the building. And you see that the whole demounting process is really like playing the film, the movie of building the building backwards. And by working, not demolishing a building, but demounting a building, you work a very clean process with not much noise. It was in an inner city location, so we had limited access to with trucks. So really having the whole process being planned very, very minutely, with every detail, with every element coded with a QR code, we could really have influence on the entire process and have not so much nuisance to the environment. This is what the building looks like now. The first elements are being rebuilt at this moment in Enschede. That's on the east part of the Netherlands, about 100 meters to the east, 100 kilometers to the east. And there it will become an office building. So it will not become a courthouse again, but an office building. And it was very simple because the whole structure was able to adapt to that new function. And then what's left over are these, the small parts which cannot be reused according to especially to the regulations. These are elements that you have to reuse new and anew. And when the building is gone, then this is now the site where it was, and this will be the site where it will be. Actually, more or less the same building, but only the east and the west facade are interchanged because it's 180 degrees turned around. So with this project, I like to show you talk not so much about the architecture, but more about the process that we as architects or developers can follow to have more circular buildings. We all know that once we start thinking in linear business models, start really approaching the whole building process in a linear way, we will never get to that CO2 reduction. The recycling economy, which has a lot of attention, is obviously very important, but also will not be able to reach to the CO2 reduction that we actually need. We really need to go to that zero waste economy that we call the circular economy, and we can do that by making our buildings suitable for that circular economy, making them circular ready, as we call, and that is mostly done by the right detailing, thinking about the whole process, really thinking about which materials do we use, how do we code them, how do we do the building information modeling, and in that way we really can work together towards a circular ready built environment. That's where I would like to conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much. We only have a few short minutes. My name is Tove Dumont-Wallsten. I'm here from Architect Sweden. And for our profession, as for the whole sector, of course, circularity is a very urgent topic. We need to change the way we build and the way the impact buildings make on environment. I would like to pose a question. Your work with the circular construction economy transition team, a very ambitious program from the Dutch government. Yep. So you work with implementation and ways to implement, and it's all the industry should be circular by 2050. It's been described as climbing a mountain, and right now you're putting up the base camp.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
We do that in the team, where in that team there are designers, but also universities, municipalities. They're all and also companies. They're all involved in that team. So every aspect of the whole building industry is represented in the team, and we do that by we try to work towards that base camp, which we already established now, but towards the next phase by really advising the Dutch government on how they can steer the legislation in the right way, and that goes from very simple advices that we give, that every building, if you design a building, you should also make a plan how the building can be demounted, how you can after 5 years or 10 years or 100 years, how it can be relatively easily disassembled. But also we give advice on tax reform, the problem of true pricing. Some very pollutive materials are still too cheap, so that you don't pay the real price for certain materials. But those topics are really for broader. They have to be addressed in Europe. You cannot address them only in one country, but you have to start somewhere. Yeah.
So the circular business models on a national as well as a European level is a step we need to move towards. Time is running very short, but I advise you all to look into this ambitious program by the Dutch government. There is a lot of open source reports, guidelines on procurement, on building, and on circular economy and how to implement it, how to work with it in business models. And also look into the CPZ office projects. You have all in your firm already, from designing, the project lead, the architects, the interior, the building, and also the demolition. Yeah,
we have now a joint venture. As a project developer, we have established a joint venture with a demolition company. And if we start a new project, we already involve them so that they know exactly how a building is easily taken apart and how you can have the value of the materials as high as possible during the entire lifetime of the building.
So look more into it. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay.
Very inspirational.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.